Eager, you should watch your wife. What is it, Mom? Can't you see anything further than your own nose? Don't you notice that she walks around with her eyes blinded with happiness? She's always in the clouds answering inappropriate questions. What do you think that means? She's got a lover. You silly head. What lover, Mom? Alevtina and I already have a grandson going to school. At our age, you cannot fear the competition and weaken the position. That's what I see. You've loosened your position. Your position is hanging there with fat folds, overhanging something. And your wife, she never gave up her position. She's still young, slim and beautiful. And you fool, you're too lazy to pick flowers for her. Did I plant roses all over the garden for nothing? I stood at the open window on the second floor in the house of my mother-in-law, and, incognito listening to this conversation, barely kept myself from laughing. My mother-in-law is the wisest woman in the world. She always notices everything and knows how to apply the collected information in the right place. And now, of course, she got it right. I'm really in love. Not with a strange man, of course. I've fallen in love with my own creativity. Not so long ago, I had taken up photography, and the process had taken over my whole being, so much so that from the outside, I must have looked like a schoolgirl in love. Sensing my presence, Anna Mikhailovna cast a fleeting glance at the windows of the second floor and turned to Igor again. Take tea to your wife, she's probably awake. Yegor also looked in the direction of the house. Why should she carry tea then? If Alia is awake, then she'll come out now. I realized that it was time for me to join them at the table. Otherwise they'd make up some more stories. Good morning. What a wonderful day it is today, I exclaimed, falling on the chair next to my husband. Do all days seem wonderful to you, Alyosha? Mother-in-law squinted her eyes. Is it bad? I asked, frightened. No, it's good. It's wonderful that at your age, you're in a good mood every day. We create our own moods, I thought. If Igor is flipping through the news feed all day long, what kind of mood can he be in? It's as simple as 2 times 2. People love sensationalism. Only evil seems sensational to them. People are suspicious of good news. Accordingly, having absorbed as much bad news as possible early in the morning, my husband himself becomes darker than a cloud. Speaking of clouds, one of them was just hovering over our house, and it looked so spectacular that I ran for my camera. Where did she learn this? As you call it, photographic art? I heard my mother-in-law say. In the studio, muttered Igor. That's where you start looking for traces. What traces? The lover, you fool. Yegor didn't bother, and, as soon as we got home, he asked, do you have a lover? No, I answered without thinking. Good, my husband nodded and reached for the TV remote control. Wait, if you had a lover, would that be a bad thing? My husband looked at me in surprise. It would be bad, of course. It just seemed to me that you didn't care. I really thought that if I told him that I had another man, the Igor would have nodded, said, okay, and reached for the remote just the same. I guess the lingering rain was to blame for my mood. It's only when rain is not a frequent guest that it seems welcome and causes a kind of pinching tenderness. Well, or in Alexander Sergeyevich, rain is good in all its manifestations. In fact, the prolonged watering of the sky does not cause positive emotions in almost no one, and some people are depressed. I didn't feel sadness at that time, rather some disappointment, and it came down to our relationship with Igor. It seemed to me that I was like a TV remote control for him, a necessary thing, but so commonplace that it was disgusting. The familiar becomes invisible, it's a truism. But I'm a living person. I can't be invisible, especially to my husband. The most frustrating thing was that Igor did not even really see my work. Although my photos took first place at exhibitions, albeit local, but still, I needed to share my success with my husband. But my husband wasn't around, or rather, he was there, but he was completely absent from my life. Why did I wash the car yesterday? Grumbled my husband on the way to work. When I managed to get ready on time, Igor drove me to the office. It was, frankly speaking, not so often, because he and I live in different time dimensions. That is, if my husband said to be ready in half an hour, 10 minutes later he would say, let's go. I wish I had another 10 minutes like that, and I would have made it honestly. After all, I know my husband and I always try to be ready in advance, but time in his dimension is constantly shrinking, and no matter how hard I try, I will never catch up with him. To get into a clean salon in the morning, I joked, and immediately get it dirty with mud from your shoes. It's just water, Igor. We drove on in silence. We only said goodbye and exchanged a few phrases about what we had to do for the evening. At work, the girls were discussing something in a circle. Alia, come here, called Sveta from the marketing department. Look what an atmospheric place, and, by the way, not anywhere, but in our city. In the suburbs, to be exact. Katya, who had recently met a new boyfriend and was in a hurry to get as much pleasure as possible from this affair, was bragging about the pictures. The hotel rooms are gorgeous, Katya commented on another picture. We stayed in a suite, but, as I heard, the rest of the apartments are fine. My attention was attracted by the picture of the lake, located right at the foot of the hill. Such elevations are not peculiar to our area, we live in a flat area, and so the view was really extraordinary. And this lake, where is it? I asked Katya, literally half a kilometer from the hotel. I listened to my colleagues' stories about a fabulous place outside the city, and went to finish the report. This nasty monster had been waiting for me since yesterday, and recognized no one but me. By evening I was so tired, and when I saw my husband's message that he was late at work, and I would have to take the shuttle bus home, I sighed. It was still drizzling outside the windows, and I suddenly thought how nice it would be to be outside the city now, near the lake at the foot of the hill, to wander through the woods and take lots of pictures. An idea popped into my head and I rushed home. At home, having put the chicken in the oven, I chopped vegetables. I went to the website praised by a colleague, Country Boarding House. The vacation spot was really impressive, and I dreamed. What are we doing? My husband's voice sounded in my ear. I jumped up and slammed my laptop shut. Scared me. I didn't hear you come in. Let's go to dinner. I fussed for some reason. At dinner, I sat all mysterious. I had a great idea to offer Igor to spend the upcoming holidays in that place. And, although I was impatient, I decided to wait and voice my plans. When I found out everything in detail, the boarding house turned out to be quite a popular place, and I hardly managed to book the last house, standing on the very outskirts. Well and good, but away from the rest of the vacationers. Igor does not like noisy gatherings. What was my disappointment when my husband was not happy about my proposal. He said that he had planned to spend the weekend in a completely different way and refused to go. Call one of your friends, suggested Igor. I really called my friends, but they all had their own plans. Then I decided that I would go to this country paradise alone. I don't need anyone. I will relax in nature, take pictures, and enjoy the silence. In anticipation of the trip, I even bought a few new things, mostly sportswear, but there were also a couple of dressy dresses. I must look beautiful against the background of nature. And here I am. Honestly, the first day I just wandered around the neighborhood with a smile on my face. The houses were located so that vacationers almost did not cross each other, and the surrounding natural beauty was enough not to run into anyone. I walked around all the places step by step like a mesmerized person. I took pictures from different angles and was unspeakably pleased with some shots. On my first day here, my husband asked me how I got here and checked in. Then he sent a couple more messages, and soon he stopped talking. At first I was terribly offended, and then I started to think crazy thoughts. What if he didn't just send me away on this trip? What were his plans for the holidays? I had not clarified this information, and now I wondered why he refused to go with me. For some reason I remembered that lately Igor was often late at work, was silent and so on, although he had always been not particularly chatty, but still. And here I'm already mentally drawing pictures, one more horrible than the other. We young women tend to invent mistresses for our husbands, even scraping them off the pages of glossy magazines. And although I had not noticed this tendency before, yet, left to myself and away from my spouse, I succumbed to this trick of my own inner insecurity. After going over in my mind all the possible candidates for the role of my husband's mistress, I came to the conclusion that I was paranoid and decided to distract myself. Tomorrow I'll go on an impromptu camping trip, I decided, and sat down to study the possible routes. Early in the morning, I picked up some food at the bar, and even finished some groceries at a small shop on the grounds of the boarding house. As I was making these preparations, I got a strange feeling that someone was watching me. There must be cameras around here, I decided, and bravely set off. I was in a great mood, and as I walked out onto the forest path, I even started humming something. When I couldn't hit a high note, a chuckle sounded behind me. I stopped and listened. Birds were singing happily in the trees. The wind was whispering with the leaves, but there were no other sounds. I continued on my way, this time without musical accompaniment. I didn't see or hear anything suspicious, but I had the feeling that I was not alone in the forest. I felt a little uncomfortable, even a little anxious to go home. I came to a stream and bent down to rinse my hands. I saw a human shadow flickering in the willow thicket. I stood up like a stumbling block. The man in the bushes was clearly watching me, and nothing good from it was not to be expected. That's it, Alevtina, I thought. Now you will be the victim of a maniacal attack, and your mortal body will go to the wild beasts. Most of all, for some reason, I felt sorry for the unopened pictures. I had hoped to show my work to our teacher, the young talented artist Grisha, from whom, in fact, I was trained in photography. A branch cracked in the bushes, and my body was covered with goosebumps. What a fool. I went into the woods alone, without even informing anyone of my chosen intention. My mind raced, and I hurriedly pulled my phone out of my backpack. My fingers weren't listening. Every second I was expecting an attack, and I was constantly looking around. I dialed my husband's cell phone number, and actually at the same time a familiar tune sounded in the bushes. When my husband set this ringtone on my call, I laughed for a long time. The singer of the song, Katya Semyonova, would probably also have been greatly surprised by such a choice of Igor. I was lucky in life that I got a prince on a white horse as a husband, and the white horse is me. The words sounded and I, opening my mouth in surprise, watched my husband getting out of the bushes, shaking off dry grass on the way. Good thing you're not a maniac, I exclaimed first of all. And where are you going? For some reason, my husband asked in a disgruntled tone instead of greeting me. And you, what were you doing in those bushes? I didn't think you'd come this far. Apparently, you were planning a secret rendezvous, so that no one would track you down. Who's you? You and your artist. What artist? Don't play dumb. I stared at my husband. His face was slightly swollen, but still, if he, for example, had gone on a binge and then caught a squirrel, his look should have been a little more intimidating. Igor, if something happened to you, you'd better tell me about it, because I was already scared to death. I was ready to accept death by an outsider maniac, which happened to be you, by the way. I know everything, you don't have to pretend. What I don't understand is why you asked me to come down here, just to keep me out of the loop. I'm still upset with you, by the way. Of course, you're always putting things from bad to worse. I found out. Your lover did not hide where he was going, so it was not difficult to compare the facts. I silently listened to him, trying to build a logical chain, but so far the sequence of his reasoning had drifted away from me like fog over a river under the onslaught of morning. A black jeep appeared on the other side of the creek, where the road ran. Igor looked into the distance and immediately threw me an angry glance. Here comes the lover, easy on the wrist. I immediately recognized the car. The car belonged to Grisha, the teacher of our group of novice photographers, but I can't imagine what he was doing here. The car turned to the creek and stopped. After that, all four doors opened and out of the cabin came out Grisha himself. A young girl and two children, a boy and a girl. They went down to the creek and only then noticed us. Alevtina, good afternoon. You also decided to spend the holidays in the country. Yes, we rented a house in a boarding house, I shouted, and my family and I stayed on vacation there too. But in the main building, Grisha waved his hand and said, then maybe we'll cross paths again. Yes, have a good day. Grisha's family still stood on the bank of the stream for a while. Then they again got into the car and drove away. When the car disappeared from sight, Igor asked, and what does this mean? You know better. You haven't explained anything to me yet. And I don't have the gift of clairvoyance. On the way back, Igor still gave explanations for his actions. It turned out that just the day after my departure, he began to be overcome by doubts. My husband decided to take his mother's advice and called the studio where I was trained. He found out that the director was a young man. When my husband expressed a desire to see him, he was told that Grisha is now on vacation in a new country house. Here already in my husband's head began to form a puzzle. and he made certain conclusions. Meanwhile, we came to the cabin that I had rented for our outdoor vacation and went inside. Only then I noticed that some papers were sticking out of Igor's jacket pocket. "What is it?" I asked, pulling out our marriage certificate. "He wanted to file for divorce right away," my husband muttered. I went over to him and put my arm around his shoulders, then touched his lips with a gentle kiss. "What was that for?" Yeager asked. "For the fact that you care." Igor looked at me with a new, or almost forgotten look. "You just can't imagine what I experienced this morning, sneaking through those bushes." My imagination painted 100 pictures, one more horrible than the other. He was silent for a while. "Alia, I'm never going to give you to anyone. Get it through your head?" And I wasn't going to. I thought to myself. Igor finally looked around. "What? Are you still looking for traces of your lover?" Luckily, there doesn't seem to be any trace of him here, or he would have found out from me what a pound of flesh is worth. Igor shook his fist in the air and smiled. "You were right. It's worth resting in a place like this. And, listen, while I was wandering through the woods, tracking you and your lover, stop giving me some kind of lover. I've only ever had one lover in my life." "Who?" Igor became agitated again. "You." The husband smiled contentedly, although his reaction was very strange, given that we had been together since my early youth, and it was he who had once made me a woman. I remember my father keeping a suspicious eye on us to make sure that fact didn't happen before the wedding. He didn't, of course. "I have a great idea," continued Igor. "Let's go camping, as before, with tents and a sack of potatoes. And with millet for breakfast." "Absolutely. And where will you get all this?" "Nonsense, I'll get it." Igor actually ran off somewhere and in an hour brought everything we needed. A tent, sleeping bags, food and so on. "The nights are still cold." I was worried. "We'll keep each other warm like before?" "Like before? Even better." And we went camping, or picnic, because we went by car. We're not little kids carrying all this stuff around. To say that those were the best days of my life is an understatement. When you are young, you don't take such moments as gifts of fate. All romance seems to be a self-evident appendix to love. But then the romantic component of our life we can only create ourselves. How does Alexander Grin put it? "Miracles must be made with your own hands, and then everything will be new. The soul, love and even life itself." We've forgotten about time. There in the forest, on the bank of some nameless rivulet, our family was born again. Not everyone can turn back time, but we did it. I remember exactly that in those days I felt like a 17-year-old girl, not a grandmother, whose grandson is about to go to school. Igor also did not complain about his ailments, getting wood for our fire, wielding an axe in a way that would be the envy of the most skillful woodsman. Once we heard the sound of an approaching car, and I was surprised to see the jeep of the artist Grisha. "Here you are." Grisha stuck his head out the open window. "You, by the way, have already lost?" Employees of the rest home were going to organize a search. "And what day is today?" Igor became agitated. "From tomorrow is already a working day," laughed Grisha and shook his head incredulously, looking around our makeshift home. My cheeks flushed for some reason. It seemed to me that the young man correctly interpreted our departure to this deserted place. I woke to the bright sunlight streaming into my mother-in-law's second-floor room. The day promised to be hot. I, stretching, opened the window and heard voices. "Have you found your wife's lover?" Anna Mikhailovna asked. "I found him," Yeager answered her. "And who is he?" "It's me."